Hello and welcome to What's Not Gas. Today I'm making a video on fat bikes, Ruff Cycle here behind me, because it's a market segment that's growing quite fast, at least in Europe, and I've seen in the United States it's growing as well. And given that most of these bikes are made in Asia, I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's quite famous there as well. However, there's a lack of information because in Europe we call them fat bikes. In the United States, they're called fat tire because of their history in the mountain bike section, but this is really a new segment of e-bikes. They became super popular in the Netherlands. I'll explain why, but their popularity is quickly growing throughout Europe and abroad. When I was visiting Eurobike 2024, a few weeks ago, I noticed how many people were testing these bikes out, and usually that's a telltale sign for what's coming next year. So first things first, what's a fat bike? In the United States, we often say fat tire, and technically that's still correct, but it's also used for mountain bikes with very fat tires. In the United States, there's quite a demand for that, and so let's call those fat tire mountain bikes. Here we're focusing on fat bikes. Now, this is a new segment, let's call it a new segment, and let's say that it mostly focuses on electric bikes that still have pedals but have a very motorcycle type design. What's key about them is those fat tires, 20 inch on 4 inch. As soon as you reach that 4 inch of width, technically it's considered a fat bike. These aren't official rules, so anyone can make a fat bike and call it a fat bike as soon as it has fatter tires. Why are they suddenly so popular? Well, that's quite simple, at least in Europe it is. In the United States, Super 73 is quite a known brand. It's a lifestyle brand. They have a lot of marketing, and so they're known for that reason. In Asia, they drive around because it's a more typical style of riding. But in Europe, where there's a preference for a traditional looking bike, design bike, it's now a segment that's growing quite rapidly. And it started in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, mopeds, gas driven, were very popular. Up to 25 kilometers an hour, you didn't need a helmet. Then the law changed and these people all had to wear helmets, something they really didn't want to do. Instead of going for e-bikes, well, technically they still went for e-bikes, they went for fat bikes. And at that time, there were only cheap products available on the market, low quality and very easy to jailbreak. You can up their speed to 40 kilometers an hour without an issue. And so many of these people started driving that around. But it's so cheap that a lot of kids also started buying them. So far, there's no law against it, so there were kids, 10-year-old, 12-year-olds, that were driving e-bikes up to 40 kilometers an hour. Because fat bikes became so popular and there was an issue with the products, there were a few Dutch brands who decided we want to do this better, and they started making their own fat bikes. Some of these brands, 4 of them, have now created a convention because they feel the law is changing, well, it's not fast enough, and they feel like they can lobby and advise the government to make sure that there's correct rules and regulations for these fat bikes. So let's start the story there. Let's start with Dutch fat bike brands. They all have gone through the same process, meaning they're all quite new, 2-3 years in existence, maybe 4 if they're lucky. 2024 or 2023 for some is really the first year where they're creating their own designs, that it's handmade even in Holland or in the Netherlands. That's also why they're in a good position to advocate or lobby for these better fat bike rules, at least in the Netherlands, but other countries will quickly follow, as in this moment the Netherlands is the epicenter of fat bikes. Anyway, Phatfour, they have quite compact fat bikes and they just look simple, cool, and nice. They also try to work on a lot of accessories so that the people that drive with these fat bikes also have reasons to use it for their daily activities. You really need to see these bikes as more than just cool fat bikes. They're really utility bikes as well. They need to suit a lifestyle. So if you're a parent, they need to be able to carry a child seat. If you want to ride it with 2 people, there needs to be a model for that. Dutch people are also quite big. It's definitely something that they keep in mind. It needs to suit their target audience and then grow from there. What's also cool about this brand is that they really try to show off their brand. They try to make the bike cool and add stuff like the carry-on here, which we also saw at Eurobike. Second in line, and also part of the convention, is Brekr. They currently have 3 models, but as you can see here, one of them, the B7000, is actually not an e-bike. It's an e-motorcycle. As you can see, it doesn't have any pedals and it goes way beyond those 25 kilometers an hour. And so you actually do not see this as an e-bike, obviously. The B4000, which is also an electric motorcycle, is the one that we saw at Eurobike. It was quite popular there and it drives quite well, to be honest. So they're not really a fat bike brand, but they do have a fat bike model, which is quite popular in the Netherlands, as well as at the Eurobike, where we saw a lot of them. It looks a lot like a motorcycle, and that's exactly what they want it to look like. And it rides quite well, just like a motorcycle would. The only difference is you need to pedal, and it has a max top speed of 25 kilometers an hour. Next in line is Knaap. Knaap was actually one of the first to conquer Holland by storm. Wasn't Holland, it was Amsterdam specifically. In Amsterdam, the fat bike hype really came to its peak last year. I was told that in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, the amount of fat bikes being driven around was just crazy and hectic. And Knaap was actually the first to offer some quality compared to the cheap Asian models that were available at that time. Keep in mind their designs were also sourced from those same factories, but they just ordered pieces that were more qualitative and they really tried to adapt the bike to the Dutch market. This year, Knaap has released their own design, the Knaap LAX and New York, which are more typical urban e-bikes than they are fat bikes. That does mean that Knaap is not a full fat bike brand, but is diversifying. But they are part of the Dutch convention, and so definitely worth mentioning in this video. And last but not least in the 4-brand convention is Doppio. Doppio also has a new bike, the Lasta, where they've implemented their own design, fitting to the Dutch commuter. As you can see, everything looks elevated from the steering wheel to the saddle, but it also features that new GPS tracker, which makes it easier to insure. Not easier, just possible. A big problem in the Netherlands. There's 2 more Dutch brands who deserve a mention here. One of them being Stoer, which means tough in Dutch, who is now coming with their first all new owned design, the Urban X. The last Dutch brand to feature in this video is Astonic e-rides. They never made use of OEM models or existing models, they always created their own versions. As you can see here, they touched quite a few segments, from the typical motorcycle beach cruiser style to one adapted to the Dutch commuter with 2 kids, as well as some more cafe cruiser chopper style bicycles. They also have an extra long one for 2 people or bigger people, as well as a custom option because they hand make everything, and so you can just order or design your own e-bike / fat bike. So that kind of covers the Dutch brands. If there's more, I'm sorry I missed you guys, but Super 73 is probably one of the brands people have heard of. It's a lifestyle brand from the United States, and they really pushed everything into their marketing. They look cool, and as you can see, they have several designs, one that fits different segments. Super 73 is probably the most sold brand in the United States, or at least the one that's made the most noise. Another one of those lifestyle brands is Ruff Cycles. Back to their fat bikes, the most sold one is the Little Buddy, and with the Little Missy, they now have a version that's meant for a female audience. What's so cool about Ruff Cycle is just the amount of ways you can change this simple, minimalistic fat bike. There's so many colors you can choose out of. They have these special editions like the Miss Vita we saw here, or the GTA version, which we saw at Eurobike as well. The Biggie is available in this green color. And the Ruffian also has quite unique and iconic paint jobs on an already legendary bike. Ruff Cycles is kind of like Super 73, where they put a lot of effort into their marketing, the lifestyle, and creating an extra feeling when you're sitting on their fat bike. Surprisingly, Ruff Cycle is German, even though they have this very strong West Coast vibe, and their production is in Europe as well. Another brand that I've been discovering is Ape Ryder. I made a video about this because their website isn't up to date yet, but it's definitely a brand that you want to get to know. It feels like a lifestyle brand, just like Ruff Cycle, just like Super 73. They really make some cool stuff, but it's quite a new brand and their marketing isn't up to date yet. somewhere that's logical. They want to focus on their bikes before they focus on the marketing, right? You want to have a good product before you start selling. Next year, they're coming with some improvements on their current lineup, as well as some new models. That Gibbon that I spoke about, as well as the Loris, definitely a brand that I'll be keeping an eye on. The next brand is Korean, and they made that very specific, is we use Korean pieces and you can't compare Korean to Chinese. I'm not going to say one or the other is better, but BR3 is definitely a brand that caught my attention at Eurobike. Passing their stand, we saw that their design looks a lot more like a motorcycle than the current brands that I've covered. They do have things that are quite similar, but that motorcycle look is definitely something they want to keep. The Cafe Racer, they have models with a mid-engine as well as rear-wheel models which are a bit cheaper. The last brand I spoke with was Michael Blasts, but apparently it is a French brand and they're also aiming for that fat bike market. Quickly looking at their website and their lineup, we see they have quite nice and unique designs. Last one on our list is Kuiperbelt, and maybe I'm saying it wrong because it sounds quite Dutch, but it's actually a Swedish company. And if the Swedes are getting involved in making e-bikes, you know quality is coming. Kuiperbelt makes their own bike. They have this own unique design and it's actually quite nice. You see how this spring goes through the frame and attaches to the other part of the frame. And they also worked on having quite a unique design, as well as accessories and a display that matches the whole bike. I say bike, but it does look more like a motorcycle than anything else. So now that we've covered most of the best-selling brands or most famous brands, at least in Europe, and I tried for the United States as well, let's take a look at who receives an honorable mention in this video as well. There's a few brands out there. First up, Yadea. It's an Asian brand, and I know they're an OEM supplier as well, but they do seem to have some direct-to-consumer models available as well. If we go to their product section on the e-bikes, we see the Cocoa, which does seem to have fat bike tires, as well as the Trooper, which is incredibly similar to one of the Ape Ryder. La Souris is a Dutch reseller, so it's actually a shop where people can buy multiple brands, but they also do have their own brands. They don't have a website to show those models separately, so we just need to go on this website to see what they have, and there's quite a few options out there. From cheaper bikes to more expensive models, they also have their newest, the Don Souris, which is their own design and has been adapted to match their market, the Dutch market. However, La Souris is growing quite fast, so it wouldn't surprise me if they start selling abroad quite soon. Asonic is a brand I didn't know before, but I discovered them, and looking at the 750 watt motor, it usually means that they're available in the United States and they work with a throttle or gas handle. They sell normal e-bikes with fat bike tires, but they also do have some new models available here. This A1 series seems to be something new that resembles fat bikes much more, and then a few different e-bikes with fat bike tires. If we look at this A1, it's an all-terrain. It has a 1200 watt motor, which does mean again that it's not legal in Europe, at least not for the open roads, and is priced around 3,500 euros or dollars. Himiway is another one of those brands that isn't a fat bike brand, but they do have some models available. If we look at their newest bikes, the C5 Sport does seem to be a fat bike. And in their e-bike section, we see they have a motorbike, also a fat bike design. It has pedals, so it's still a bike, as well as this kids bike and the cargo bike, which all seem to have fat tires. As you can see, they look quite cool. It's their own design. And they also have a second model available, one with a low step. In Belgium, there's also this brand called Monkey Bike. They have the Monkey Tail, the Monkey X, which are all fat bikes. The Monkey Tail is a long tail bike with fat tires, and the Monkey or the Monkey X is a more compact or BMX type of bike. The last two brands that I'll cover in this video is GasGas and Yamaha. Now, it shouldn't be that big of a surprise that motorcycle and motocross brands are joining the fray. This is their segment. They only need to make their models electric and with pedals, and GasGas has done so. They have the Moto 1 and Moto 2, which are quite similar, just different in specs, and they really do maintain that MotoGP vibe. As far as I know, this one's already available for sales in the United States and in Europe, and I also did see a few of them being driven around at Eurobike. The Yamaha Booster is their version of a fat bike. It does have that mid-engine, so it's quite comparable, for example, to a Ruff Cycle, but it doesn't look the same whatsoever. A Booster back in my day used to be a moped, 50cc up to 50 kilometers an hour, and they kind of looked exactly like this. So Yamaha is really making an electric booster type of version for e-bikes. So that was it. We've covered most of the brands, at least the most famous ones, the best sold ones. And I'm sure this list will continue to grow and change over the years, so expect a new video next year with a lot of updates, as this is really a growing market segment. I hope you liked this video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the comment section down below. If you liked the video, help me out, do a like and a subscribe, and then you'll be notified when I post my next video. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll be working on my next video, and you will see me next time. Bye.